All right, we're going to start out with a question that was emailed from Laura Strickler, who's a CBS Evening News producer, who was on her way here and got reprogrammed for other news. The question is to General Myros and Mr. Davis. Given the increasing automation of things like metro trains, planes, et cetera, does it make us more vulnerable to cyber attacks? And can these things be prevented?
Well, I mean, I start, absolutely we're more vulnerable to cyber attacks than any time in history, and I think the whole purpose is to try to stay ahead of the curve before you get some kind of cyber Pearl Harbor is the term that's generally used, but we want to stay ahead of that curve before something gets into, something gets top secret and can do a lot of damage. We've seen so many penetrations now. When politicians see it on their computers in their offices, when they're seeing it going into their websites for their campaigns, then it hits home. But it could get into a critical infrastructure and do everything from, you know, the airplanes, trains, the public, the electronic grid. There's a lot of vulnerabilities out there today. Some of them we haven't even thought about, and we're trying to stay ahead of the curve.
From my perspective, anything that's connected is vulnerable and at risk. Second of all, what a lot of folks don't realize is everything that gives you a capability or a functionality in cyberspace represents an attack thread that somebody can come back and use against you. The last thing I would say is that there is a concept that when we talk about cyber or we talk about computer penetrations and networks, then people think that's network. That's something that doesn't touch me. And in fact, anything that touches cyberspace is a part of this. So it's not just computers. You know, it's your ATM card and the ATM. It is your ability to turn a light on and off in your house. And so again, I would encourage folks to not narrow their perspective when they hear about computer networks at risk, thinking that, well, all I've got is I've got my own computer. It's not connected to a network. I just plug into the internet. They're not talking about me. If it's connected, it's vulnerable. If you're able to do something, that's an attack thread. And there are all kinds of appliances that are propelled by cyber.
Please identify yourself when you ask the question.
Hi, I'm Josiah Ryan with CNS News. Mr. Bamford, you painted a pretty cynical picture of what this position is, something like a straw man. I'm wondering if you can talk about what the political motivations behind creating such a powerless position would be. And I'm wondering if General Myros and Congressman Davis would agree with the picture that Mr. Bamford painted.
What was you just repeat the first part of your question there?
You painted the kind of a powerless position within the White House, and I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the politics behind it. What is the motivation for the administration creating this position if there's really no power behind it?
Well, I mean, just looking at the position on a piece of paper, you can see it's very low down the totem pole. I think the idea of creating the position is a great idea, and I think President Obama talked about it a great deal before or during the election and before he was elected. I just think there was at least in a number of the circles I hang around in, there was a bit of a disappointment after the talk that the position didn't have the stature that it might have had. I think Congress, somebody from a former congressperson would be a good person to have the job because you have to deal a lot with Congress. I don't think you have to be a real techie to do it. I think you need some stature. You have to be somebody that's powerful, somebody that can break through the bureaucracy and get to the president and tell him you've got to do this. Forget what these people are saying. You've got to do this. And I don't see that at this level, this person. I don't know who would take that position. If you're powerful, you're not going to take a sort of a junior staffer position. The politics of why it happened, I have no idea. Well, there's a lot of things about the Obama administration that haven't made sense to me in terms of why they've done things, and this is just one more thing. They said, you know, they were going to take different policies on secrecy, on a lot of other issues, and then they changed their mind after the election. So maybe they changed their mind and they didn't want a really powerful position. The problem is there is going to be a vacuum there, and there is going to be a very powerful cyber person, and that's going to be the director of the cyber command. So you should have some counterbalance there in the White House to say, well, I think they're going a little too far there, and that's why I think it should be more powerful. But I don't really know why they did that.
I take a little bit different view. After over 3.5 decades in the federal government, I know that major things sometimes take small steps to get started. I have a phrase that I developed over time that helped me accomplish what things I was managed to accomplish in government. Think big, start small, scale fast. And so I think almost by necessity ends up being a small step. Does it fall short of what some folks would want to press harder and faster, saying there's not enough time, we're falling behind, and all those kinds of things? I mean, there's merit to that discussion. But major things, almost by necessity, if they're not in response to an emergency, almost by nature, start small. The key is their top cover. I've advocated ever since the administration announced the 60-day review that I thought a person of prominent name recognition ought to be in this, because it's not only working within government, but it's being able to get access in industry and be a household name with the American public.
You know, there are so many czars in this administration. You don't know at the end of the day what are the real priorities. If you make everything a priority, nothing becomes a priority sometimes. So I'm not cynical about it, but I think we need to understand that this, from what was just described earlier, this is a very complicated, difficult task. If nothing else, you get to deflect blame if you're on top and you have a czar and something happens. After 9/11, instead of blaming the terrorists, I think sometimes we looked at each other and pointed fingers at each other and said, was this Clinton's fault? Was this Bush's fault? What did they know? What did they let go through? That's the politics of this. And I think at a minimum, an administration wants to be on top, because this has been neglected for a long time by administrations from both parties that have really failed to put together, in my judgment, the appropriate leadership. We'll see where it goes. As I said before, I applaud them for identifying this as a key issue, trying to put one person in charge, but it's a very difficult, complicated task.